Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a classic Subaru issue, diagnosing an overheating problem on this Forester XT. Along the way, I'm going to show you some handy tips to help you troubleshoot coolant or overheating issues in your car. I've always been a fan of the Forester XTs because they're the perfect mix of practicality and sportiness. Under the hood, it's powered by the same EJ series 2.5 liter engine we worked on in the WRX build a few months back. The big difference? This one has a slightly smaller turbo, which means less lag and quicker spool, but you sacrifice power at the top end. Plus, this one has an automatic transmission, great for convenience in everyday driving, but not so much loved by purists. The leg and headroom back here is pretty cool too, especially for someone like me who's 6'4" and has a size 14 shoe. Add in enough ground clearance to handle some off-road adventures, Subaru's legendary all-wheel drive system, and that aggressive hood scoop. It's no surprise these cars have a cult following. But before this car hits the road, we need to fix it. When I bought the car, the original owner had told me that it overheated. So he brought it to the dealer and had it diagnosed. They then handed him a very expensive repair quote. And instead of doing that, luckily, he decided to sell it to me. Now, with that said, I haven't done any diagnosing to this thing yet. So if you guys think you have an idea of what it is, let me know in the comments. The only thing I have done to this car so far is drain and refill the coolant with new clean coolant. That way we can get a better view of what's going on in there. Oh, and here's that quote, almost $10,000. Luckily, I think we can avoid going down that route. Let's re-diagnose this thing and figure out exactly what's going on. An overheating engine can be caused by a lot of things, so I'm going to start with the basics, a visual inspection of the coolant system. I'm going to check the hoses for cracks, damage, or signs of coolant leaks. Not seeing anything up top here. Expansion tank isn't leaking at all. So far, everything up top looks pretty good. There's no visible signs of coolant or oil on top of the block, which is good. Because a lot of times when the head gaskets fail on these engines, they will leak externally as well as internally. So everything up here looks pretty good. Next thing I'm going to do is get under the car, visually inspect the hoses down there as well as the head gaskets. Yeah, so let's do that now. You'd be surprised how often a simple coolant hose failure gets overlooked. Some other common culprits of overheating are things like the water pump, radiator damage, or even an electrical issue like the fan's not coming on. Could cause a car to overheat. It is pretty dirty on this side, but I'm not seeing any issues directly from the head gasket. Looks like this car actually has a block heater. We wouldn't normally see that here in New England. It's pretty common to see on diesels, but not on gas cars. So that's kind of cool. The thermostat housing does show some age, but I don't see signs of it pouring out coolant. So I think it's safe to say we don't really have any external leaks down here. Next, I'm going to check out the oil and the coolant. If there was a failed head gasket, it does have the possibility to allow both of those to mix together. And there's also a chance that those fluids would get into the combustion chamber, which means that the car would be running rough, probably blowing smoke out the exhaust. So I'm just going to take a look at the oil first. And that right there is not looking so good. I'm not sure if you guys can see that on camera, but there is some milky whiteness in there. So we do have another sign of head gasket failure. Not good. You can also just check the oil cap itself. Sometimes when combustion gases and stuff gets through, it turns that milky white as well, but that passes the test, which is interesting. Now, because this car isn't automatic, that means the transmission cooler is built into this radiator. So if we maybe had signs of just dirty coolant and overheating and the oil was clean, that would lead me to believe that there's an issue internally with the radiator, which is pretty common. But I'm going to move forward with some other tests and visual inspections just for you guys, in case you're having a similar issue or still haven't figured it out yet. There's a few different methods you can use to check a blown head gasket. The free and easy way would be to simply start the car and check either the radiator or even your coolant overflow / reservoir. If there is a constant stream of bubbles in either one of these while the car is running, that means that the exhaust gases are getting past the gasket and into the coolant chamber. Now, should go without mentioning, but never open any of your coolant system when it's hot. One of the more accurate ways is one of these, a coolant system tester. It uses this special fluid to detect exhaust gases in the coolant system. I'll show you how that works now. So you want to make sure the coolant isn't to the top of the rad here. You might have to drain a little bit out. This one's already a little low, so we're just gonna start the car, let it warm up, stick this in here with the fluid, which will be in here, and then we'll use this little hand pump to slowly suck the coolant through. Actually, not the coolant, the exhaust gases. And this is blue. When it turns yellow, that means we definitely have combustion gases in there. So let's do that now. I'm gonna start the car, let it warm up for a bit. Then once that's done, I'll see you guys and we can start testing this. Okay, now that the engine's warmed up and still running, I'm gonna stick this in here and give it a go. You can see the bubbles, which means it's pulling air through. So one thing I did notice I want to show you guys real quick while I was in the middle of that block test is that the radiator appears to be damaged. It's hard to see in the video, but there is coolant seeping out of this plastic part up top, which is pretty common on any of these newer radiators that are plastic. So whether or not that's the main cause of our issue, I'm not sure, but it's possible that this damaged radiator led to a head gasket issue or the entire issue. So let's continue with the block test and we'll find out for sure. So I'm just still squeezing this bulb right now, trying to get air through. Just gonna continuously do that. And for the sake of this video, I went ahead and stuck this tool in the exhaust tailpipe for a few seconds while the car was running, just so you guys could see the color change if there are exhaust gases in the coolant system. So with that test done and passed, I'm pretty confident in saying that the head gaskets aren't bad in this car, which is what I believe to begin with. I think at this point we're gonna go ahead and replace that damaged radiator and run the car a little bit more after that. And since I don't have a radiator here, I'll have to go buy one. I'm gonna use a little bit of movie magic, and with a snap of my finger, there'll be a new one in here. While the radiator was out, I also took the time to replace the timing belt since that wasn't looking too great, plus the water pump and all the pulleys associated with it. I also went ahead and slapped in some new spark plugs, did an oil change, and threw in a new air filter. So with all that done, plus the new radiator in, and the cooling system already burped of any air, I'm gonna start it, let it idle for a while. Then I'm gonna be doing the same thing as I was earlier and just double checking for any leaks or other issues that arise. If all goes well and no other issues arise, I'll wrap up the video and cover some key points I covered along the way in case you missed them. All right, so now that this Forester is back to running great, leak-free, and not overheating, I figured I'd make a quick list of some of the things we covered in this video, plus others that you can do in case your car has a coolant leak or an overheating issue. The first step, obviously, is to visually look for any leaks. If you have a known leak or a puddle under your car, then visually inspect as many parts as you can. Common culprits for a leak like this could be a radiator hose, a water pump seal, a thermostat seal, or even a coolant expansion tank or a coolant reservoir. Then you want to check the coolant level itself. Obviously, if it's low, there's a leak somewhere, whether it be internally or externally, and you need to find it before your car has other issues. Additionally, you want to inspect the coolant condition as well. Ensure it's clean and free from any foreign fluids like oil. Obviously, if you have oil or some other type of fluid, then there's a problem internally in the system somewhere and it needs to be fixed. Speaking of oil, it's a good idea to inspect the dipstick and the oil fill cap for signs of a milky white residue. This means moisture is getting into the oil and could be a potential sign of a bad head gasket. However, engines do get hot and cold frequently, which can create moisture in the oil, so this isn't always a telltale sign of a bad head gasket. Some other things to look at would be the radiator cap or caps and your thermostat. You want to make sure the radiator caps are sealed properly and not allowing air to enter or fluid to exit the system. A faulty thermostat could cause a lot of annoying issues in a car. If it's stuck open, your car is going to run cold. If it's stuck closed, your car is going to run hot. The best way to test one is to take it out of your car and put it in a hot pot of boiling water. Then, as the temperature of the water rises, the thermostat should open up, and at a certain temperature, which is usually labeled on the thermostat itself, it should be fully open. Moving on, if you know you have a leak somewhere in your coolant system but can't exactly pinpoint it, a great tool to use would be a pressure tester. It allows you to pressurize the coolant system and check for leaks without running the engine. We didn't have to use one in this video because the leak was very apparent, but it's a great tool and usually yields great results if you're having issues still. Another great tool to use is the combustion leaker tool with the fluid like I used to test this car. It allows you to test the coolant system for exhaust gases, which would obviously be a sign of a bad head gasket. Another important part of the coolant system is your water pump. Obviously, you want to make sure it's not leaking anywhere around it, but you also want to try to listen in and make sure it's not making any weird noises, which would mean it's a faulty pump. Additionally, since the car's heat runs off the coolant system, it's a good idea to make sure you have heat in the car. If not, that means there could be a blockage or even an air bubble in the system somewhere causing an issue. You also want to make sure that the radiator fans are working properly as the car warms up. If not, then it could obviously cause the car to overheat as well. Of course, another really important part of the coolant system is the radiator. Like in the case of this car, it was damaged along the crimps, allowing it to leak just a little. It's a good idea to visually inspect yours as much as possible for any damage or signs of it failing. If you've looked over all the cooling system and still can't visually see any issues, another great thing to visually check, if possible, is where the head meets the engine block surface. If you have a failing head gasket, it is possible that the fluids could leak externally onto the engine. However, it's also possible that these fluids are leaking internally instead. This is obviously harder for you to spot, but some signs of it would be the engine running rough, plus white smoke out of the exhaust, or sweet smelling exhaust. Lastly, I think it's worth mentioning that if you feel a little overwhelmed by trying to figure out a coolant leak or overheating issue, it's a great idea to take it to a shop. However, like in the case with this car, it might be a great idea to get a second opinion if you don't trust the original diagnosis. So that's it for today's video. It's a little bit shorter than I expected, and I really didn't think it was going to be this easy to fix a coolant leak on this car. But it just goes to show with the right mindset and a little bit of thinking, you might be able to figure out an issue with your car and possibly save a lot of cash. Like I mentioned, sometimes it's a good idea to get another shop's opinion if you don't fully trust the one you go to. In this specific car's case, even though Subarus are known for having bad head gaskets, it turns out it was just the radiator. This car, for example, was misdiagnosed as needing head gaskets and a complete engine rebuild, which would have cost the previous owner about $10,000. Luckily for me, it ended up just being the radiator. So with that installed, plus some other new parts, this car is good to go. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought of this video, if I missed anything along the way, or if you have similar stories to share with a car overheating, or even a misdiagnosis at a shop. And of course, thanks for watching. I'm the Well-Dressed Wrencher. I'll see you guys next time.